It happened on a Tuesday, in the early afternoon. And afterward, the world was never the same. Back then, Beverly had been working in one of the casinos, and even now still thanked the universe for it. The lack of windows pretty much saved her, she had later learned, as insane as that sounds. Others hadn't been so lucky, though. Those outside, for example, or even people working in skyscrapers on the higher floors. They had witnessed it directly and had suffered the consequences of their bad luck. She still shivered at the thought, even now, sitting in this dark and dingy basement, trying not to fall asleep. The first time it appeared, it did so without any kind of warning. Beverly had only heard about it later, but she could imagine the shock and horror it had resulted in. Suddenly, on that Tuesday early afternoon, reality had split apart. Something no one had even thought possible. And it had happened high up in the sky. A massive black line, like dark lightning, had zigzagged across the atmosphere, and people who had looked up at that moment had stopped in their tracks. She could see them in her mind's eye, masses of people all standing there while the sky seemed to split apart. Many of them probably thought it was just some kind of optical illusion. Others might have imagined it could be a weather phenomenon or even a religious experience. But they all soon found out that it was something much worse. The black line in the sky seemed to crack, then tear, then open. Slowly at first, and the people in the streets must have felt it already, right? That there was something dangerously wrong with what they were seeing. According to a few on the internet, back when that still worked, there was movement behind the forming crack in the sky. Beverly still wasn't sure she believed those comments, but some parts of her warned her to not dismiss them out of hand. There must have been something, right? Because of what happened next. That part she was 100% sure of. The crack widened and grew. And then, behind it, people finally saw it. A single eye looking down at the world from high up above. It was larger than the city, but otherwise almost human. A brown iris, a black pupil, eyelids, and even eyelashes. The problem was that everyone who looked up at this eye completely lost their minds. Beverly knew that those reports were true as well. She had seen the video, the one that circulated on the internet just after the first appearance. Someone had filmed a crowd of people, and thankfully hadn't tilted their camera up. Beverly had heard the sudden screams that turned into a roar. From 1 second to the next, they all changed. Some tore their clothes while others collapsed. A few started vomiting and more scratched and dug their own fingernails into the skin of their face and body. There was one person in the video who still gave her the chills. A man in a grey jacket who had been carrying a bag of groceries just stood there for a few seconds, staring up at the eye in the sky before suddenly dropping everything and then turning around. He wore the biggest smile Beverly had ever seen. It completely distorted his face, pulling his lips over his teeth, almost turning the grin into a snarl. The man turned once, then twice, then suddenly grabbed a woman standing close by and rammed her face into the asphalt, over and over. No one stopped him, because almost all the others were busy tearing at their own skin, ripping out their hair and screaming. That was, at least as far as Beverly knew, the first appearance of someone from a group of people they would later call the Mad. The one filming the crowd turned off the video a few seconds later, but not before a single sentence could be heard from the grinning psychopath killing the woman.
Return to me.
He growled those 3 words as he murdered her, and since that day, they have appeared almost everywhere. Some people had left them as comments under the first articles and videos of the incident. Others started screaming them at night to scare the people around them. But every once in a while, Beverly had heard them herself, coming from outside. Not screamed, not whispered, but spoken in the exact same tone as the man in the video. Whatever that had happened, she had hidden herself immediately, knowing full well that something bad was coming. She shivered at the thought and grabbed her own shoulders even more tightly. The world as she had known it ended soon after the first appearance of the eye. People who were unlucky enough to look up at the wrong time had 3 distinct reactions. Some died of a heart attack while tearing at their own bodies. Others survived, driven completely mad by what they had seen, barely a shell of their former selves. And the last group was the Mad. Those people started grinning from ear to ear before turning into absolute monsters. They were highly aggressive, brutal beyond belief, and singularly focused on killing everyone they came across. And all the while they muttered those 3 words. Return to me. Beverly felt almost sick at the thought of coming across one of them. For now, she had managed to hide whenever they had come close, but she knew that sooner or later one of them would find her. She grabbed the knife at her hip and the gun in her holster, then shook her head. The change that had come over the world hadn't spared her either. Beverly could hardly recognize the face staring back at her from any reflective surface by now. She looked feral, almost. Part of it was probably the lack of sleep or rest, but there had also been another instance. One where she had seen the eye, or to be exact, a picture of it on the internet. In these first few days, people had tried to capture videos of the phenomena and had uploaded them. Beverly had seen one such image, and the experience had changed her. It wasn't as bad as staring at the thing directly, but it had still messed with her head far more than a normal picture should. She had felt it, the strange tension, then the headache, as something inside her brain had shifted. A sudden rush of fear had gripped her as she had sunk down on her chair, crying uncontrollably while the corners of her mouth had started twitching. She had quickly closed the laptop she had seen the picture on and unplugged it. But from that moment on, she had finally understood how severe the situation they all found themselves in was. If she had continued staring at the picture for a few seconds longer, she would have completely lost her mind as well. The world was going to end, she understood then. At first, countries still tried to keep order and come up with a logical response. Some authorities ordered their people to stay inside and shut their windows. It didn't help much. Any day, at any time, one of those cracks could form above, and everyone unlucky enough to look up at the wrong time would lose their mind. So, life pretty much stopped for most people. Planes couldn't fly anymore after dozens crashed because the pilots had the bad luck to see the eye. Outdoor gatherings were forbidden. And then There were the people who thought of it all as some kind of sign of the heavens. People who would tell others to go outside and look because they either really believed it to be God staring down on the world or just wanted to feel powerful by sending their followers to their deaths. There were instances of preachers from all different faiths telling their flock not only to go look for themselves, but also to drag out their families so they could stay together. Beverly had seen videos of that as well. Crying children clawing at their faces. Mothers holding up their babies. Even one with a maybe 8-year-old girl suddenly sporting that wide grin and going feral. She still felt sick to her stomach. Economies buckled, then broke down. People started looting and fighting. Communities fell apart. Suicides spiked. The world ended. And still, everywhere around the globe, the sky could crack and break, and suddenly that damned eye would appear again. After half a year, the internet pretty much broke down. And soon after, the power went out where Beverly had lived. She still remembered a post on social media, telling people not to despair. That there was a way of saving the world. She had scoffed when she had seen it. All over the globe, militaries had tried to do something against the eye. Some had sent up drones or planes or rockets. It didn't work. Nothing had. At least 3 different countries decided to send nukes into the eye when it appeared above them. But even that hadn't done anything besides covering the land beneath in fallout. Countries broke apart, and small groups of people started banding together to survive. Beverly had taken great care not to get too close to any of them when she had left her city and begun wandering across the land. She had seen firsthand how quickly the mood inside such groups could shift and turn. How cruel and brutal humans could get, even if they hadn't lost their minds yet. All it took was one person screwing up, one missed opportunity of gathering supplies, or even a single man or woman trying to gain power. Beverly pressed her back against the cold stone wall of the basement of this abandoned farm and looked over at her belongings. A few bottles of water, rations for another week, some weapons, bandages, and even a blanket. She had fought hard to gather them all and knew that there were many people out there who would kill her for those meager supplies. As if the situation wasn't fucked up enough on its own. Beverly put her face in her hands and tried to breathe calmly. She couldn't know if the eye in the sky was above her right now. It could be. Since there weren't many people around, one never knew what was happening outside. What she did know was that her rations wouldn't last much longer if she decided to stay here. She had already looked through every part of this house and it had come up empty. Whoever had been the owner must have taken it all with him. Or other people had arrived here first. Both options were kind of bad for her. If there had been looters around, the whole area might have already been ransacked. She groaned into her hands and felt the soles of her boots scraping over the stone ground. What was she doing? It was a question she'd been asking herself for months now. What was the end game? What was her goal? She could walk around the country surviving by looting for another few years, but then what? Sooner or later, all the food would spoil and she would starve. Or she would get caught by either one of the groups of people or run into one of the mad and get beaten to death. There had to be something more she could do, right? Her family was far away, in another country, on the other side of an ocean. She'd never get back to them, Beverly knew, and she thought she had made peace with it. But in moments like these, she just wished she could see her siblings or parents one more time. Maybe they had a plan. Maybe they're already dead. A dark voice inside her mind piped up. She felt how heavy the gun and knife she always carried with her now seemed. Wouldn't it be easier if she just gave up? That way, she could escape the eye above, the mad below, and the groups of other people roaming the countryside. No, Beverly growled. She wouldn't simply give up. If she had wanted to do it, she would have ended it all before even leaving her city. She had never told herself that it would be easy, or that she could quickly establish a new life out in the countryside. The situation she found herself in wasn't a surprise. Beverly had known it would be hard, and for now, hanging on, fighting, and running were good enough reasons for her to continue. There could still be safe zones out there, areas with electricity, shelter, and laws. She had no idea where or how to find them, but she wanted to believe that they would exist. It wouldn't be as comfortable as the world she had grown up in, but at least she would be able to sleep and live a decent life. A sudden noise outside pulled her from her thoughts, and Beverly was up on her feet in a second. Someone had just touched the wooden door. She pulled out the gun and the knife, left her backpack behind, and snuck over to the stairs leading up. Beverly tried to calm her own nerves. She hadn't heard any voices, so it probably wasn't a group of people, or one of the mad. Otherwise, this thing would have already announced itself by saying those damn 3 words. Still, her heart was racing, and she felt a slight trembling in her hands. If it were just one human, it might be fine, she told herself. Single people were far less likely to do something stupid like attack unprovoked. Sometimes one could even talk to them, exchange some information, or even barter for small things. But that wasn't always the case. She had seen some acting hurt just to turn around and attack the next moment. Beverly stopped just before she reached the top of the stairs. The best thing would be if that person turned and walked away. She didn't like interacting with anyone, especially not if they came to her temporary hideout. The person hit the door again, and Beverly felt a cold chill in her bones. It sounded angry. She didn't like that. Maybe she could leave through one of the windows, run away. No, her backpack was down in the basement. Without it, she would freeze or starve soon. So she couldn't retreat. Then, maybe she should warn them off. Beverly still grappled with the decision as suddenly, with a loud bang, the door broke and a figure stumbled inside. She raised a gun, ready to pull the trigger, but then stopped at the last moment. Rays of sunshine were streaming in through the now open entrance, and Beverly felt the terror as she saw a small smidge of blue sky behind the dark figure. Every single human feared the sky by now, and she couldn't help but wonder if the one staggering into the house might have seen an eye above just seconds before. She didn't lower the gun, but also didn't pull the trigger. Instead, Beverly raised the knife to make it clear to the intruder that she was absolutely willing and able to defend herself before growling at him in a low voice. "What the fuck do you want?" The man stopped and raised his head. He didn't give an answer. How could he, after all? Beverly drew in a sharp breath as she saw the bloody mess on the man's face. It looked like the lower half had been turned into mush. Bones were sticking out between the beard stubble. Skin was hanging down in tatters. A year ago, she would have screamed for help and rushed toward the man. But not now. No. Still holding up her weapons, she looked at the man who had tears in his eyes. They were clear. There was no sign of madness in them. Beverly tried to get her thoughts in order. He hadn't seen the eye, so he hadn't done this to himself. Which meant that someone else would be responsible. Someone strong and brutal. A shiver ran down her back, and the man staggered another step toward her. His hand was in his pocket, and Beverly immediately put her finger on the trigger. She only had 5 bullets in the magazine. Not much, but that was all she had managed to scrounge up. It would be enough for this guy in front of her in any case. He pulled something out, and Beverly got ready to shoot him if it was a weapon. There was such despair in his eyes that her hands began to tremble. The man fell with a thump and a groan, blood splattering over the floor, and the last thing he did was stretch out his arm with an object hidden in his closed hand. Beverly stayed where she was. She watched on, the weapon still trained on him, as his breathing got slower and finally stopped, while the blood coming from him started to form a puddle. Shit, she thought. He wasn't moving anymore. But that didn't mean much. Maybe he was just playing dead to fool her into letting down her guard. Bullshit, part of her mind hissed. There was no way someone pretty much without a chin would be able to play dead. The puddle of blood he was lying in would be hard to fake as well. Still, Beverly couldn't bring herself to simply walk over to him. Something inside her warned her to not get careless now. So she stood there and watched for a few more minutes. The man had turned into a corpse. There was no sign of breathing, movement, or anything. Beverly finally began moving toward it. The outstretched arm was pointing right at her, as if he had tried to give her something. Another wave of that bad feeling came over her. Still, she reached the corpse, bent down, and opened the hand. Inside was a small leather pouch and a compass. Beverly shook her head for a moment before she checked the dead man's other pockets. A map, a letter, an empty small ammunition pouch, and a knife. That was all. She looked at the map, and her heart started fluttering. Yeah, it was of this area, and 2 spots were clearly marked. One with an X, close by the farmhouses, and the other was part of a city nearby. She looked at the corpse for another moment. His shoes, jacket, and pants were all freshly sewn. He didn't have weapons, yeah, but she had found an empty box of ammo on him. The man definitely didn't look like a raider either. Maybe he was part of one of the surviving bases? The chances were good. Beverly looked at the map again, and then pulled out the compass. East-southeast. She could at least check it out. Putting the compass into her pocket, she looked at the small pouch he had tried to give her more closely. What could be in there that someone would go through all this trouble? Her fingers touched the rim, and Beverly froze. She could hear something. Footsteps on soft grass. Then a voice, low yet threatening.
Return.
Beverly felt her body immediately freeze up. A person was coming toward her. There was no doubt about that. She could hear them clearly, even over her racing heartbeat.
Return to me.
The voice muttered as a shadow fell in front of the door. Beverly looked behind her, down the stairs. Her backpack was still in the basement. But going there now, she would put herself into a bad situation with no way out. No, the fight needed to happen up here. A foot reached the wooden patio outside. She raised her gun and put everything she had taken from the corpse in her side pocket before picking up the knife again.
Return to me.
The voice said once more. It was about to happen. Her first confrontation with one of the mad. Beverly felt her arms trembling and tried to keep the gun steady. A hand touched the frame of the door. 2 more steps rang out. A face appeared in the opening. This one was a young man, maybe college age, but his eyes almost glowed with greed as he spotted her. Beverly could see the grin, so wide it had ripped the corners of his mouth. Caked blood was all over his cheeks. She now knew what had happened to the man who had died just steps from her. The mad one suddenly jumped forward and into the house, and Beverly pulled the trigger. A shot rang out and echoed back from the wall as the bullet whizzed through the air and struck the intruder right where his ribs ended on the left side of his body. Beverly almost screamed, and the man stopped for just a moment. Blood was gushing out of the wound. His smile didn't waver as he looked down, then immediately took 2 fingers and rammed them into the hole in his belly. Beverly heard the squelching sound and almost recoiled. The man's face rose again, and the next moment, he started running at her. A scream escaped her as she saw him charging. Beverly raised the gun and pulled the trigger. Another shot rang out. The bullet flew and hit the man square in the chest. He didn't seem to notice at all. The sight of his wide grin burned itself into Beverly's mind. He would kill her, she knew. Her finger trembled on the trigger. The man was just 2 steps away from her. She gave off another shot. The bang echoed around, but Beverly hardly heard it. All she could do was watch as the man charging her took another step, even as a hole appeared right between his eyes. He crashed into her. The force took her off her feet, and she raised a knife as she rolled back and waited for the next attack. It didn't come. Beverly jumped up to her feet, then pressed her back against the wall. The man, now lying still on his belly, didn't move. Blood was pooling around his head. He was dead. Beverly felt no elation. The shock was still far too deep in her bones for that. Her whole body was trembling. She felt sick and cold. She needed to get out of here. Every instinct inside her mind screamed the same thing at her. Get the fuck out! Her backpack. Beverly turned toward the stairs, but suddenly froze again. Over the ringing in her ears, she could hear something. 3 words, spoken not by the dead body in front of her feet, but from somewhere outside.
Return to me.
The voice mumbled.
Return to me.
Another answered. There were more of them, and they were coming toward her. Beverly looked at the basement one more time. Shit. The voices weren't as close as before, but there were more of them now. If they caught her down there, she would definitely die. She only had 2 bullets left. With a growl, she whirled around and started running. The mad would catch up to her if she didn't leave immediately. Abandoning her supplies hurt. But it was still better than getting caught by those things out there. She jumped over the body of the man who had given her the compass and ran for the door. Beverly could feel her legs still trembling, but forced herself to go on. Outside, the sun was shining, but she kept her eyes to the ground. The hair on the nape of her neck sprang up as she felt the warm rays on her skin. It could start again any time the eye could appear. Beverly felt sick. She needed to reach the base the man had come from and hoped they would let her in.
Return to me.
A voice behind the farmhouse said, and its sound made her almost scream. There were more of them.
Return.
She could hear it now, so clearly.
Me.
Everywhere around the farms, people were walking. It was a whole mob of them. Why? How? Didn't they attack each other? Beverly couldn't think about it any longer. She sped up and ran toward the wooded area, heading east-southeast. If one of them saw her, they would follow. Right now, she needed to escape before any of them could catch a glimpse of her. A wide, wicked smile came back to her mind, and she felt a shiver running through her as she continued speeding up, only daring to look a few steps in front. Was the eye above her right now? She thought she could feel something looking at her. Beverly almost screamed, but kept her mouth shut. Don't make a sound, she hissed at herself. Her feet reached a line of trees, and she finally dared to look ahead a bit more. Twigs were bursting under her shoes. Her own racing heartbeat was drumming in her ears. She needed to get away as fast and far as possible. Beverly heard her own steps echo back from the trees and sped up even more. The trembling in her legs hadn't stopped, she knew. Her whole lower body felt rubbery, almost ready to collapse at any moment. But she couldn't stop or slow down. The feeling of being in mortal danger was still driving her on. One of the mad might spot her. They would come after her and beat her to death. She only had 2 bullets left. It wouldn't be enough to escape if there were dozens of them around here. How could there even be that many? Well, if 1 million people had looked up at the eye and only 1% turned rabid, you'd have 10,000 maniacs running around. She answered her own question and felt a chill. Beverly jumped over some roots sticking out from the ground, then ran up a slope, grabbing hold of a small tree at the top to pull herself up. It was at that moment that she heard it again.
Return to me.
A single voice came out of the woods behind her. She looked back on instinct and almost let out a scream. There, down at the bottom of the slope, an older woman was staring up at her. Reading glasses still hung around her neck, but the old, milky white eyes seemed to be filled with life. Wrinkled lips formed a wide smile while long-dried blood caked the corners of her mouth.
Return to me.
The old woman suddenly howled, then set off toward her. Beverly watched in horror as she scaled the slope next to her with amazing speed. They don't tire, they don't feel pain. The title of one of the videos, right after the first incident, came back to her mind. Yeah, apparently they really didn't. Beverly pointed her gun at the old woman and pulled the trigger. The bullet missed and burrowed into the trunk of an old tree next to her. She could see the wide grin as the maniac drew herself up as well and started running. A cold chill flowed through Beverly's bones. Without thinking, she aimed again, then squeezed the trigger and felt a shock go up her outstretched arm. This time, the bullet hit. Not the head or the upper body, but the hip of the old woman. Beverly heard the crunch as the projectile split the bone, then saw the woman stumble and fall, but tried to get up to her feet the next second. "Get the fuck out," she howled in her mind as she whirled around and started sprinting. The woman behind her was still trying to get back to her feet. She could hear it, but didn't dare look. Beverly bit her tongue as she sprinted on, then heard a murmur in the woods around her.
Return to me. Return
More and more
to
voices
me.
were repeating the same 3 words, over and over again. They were coming toward her. She needed to get away from here. Beverly jumped over some stones and broke through shrubs, and stumbled and fell. Above her, the sun was shining. The sky was blue, and Beverly almost screamed as she rolled over onto her stomach. She tried to push herself up to her feet, but fell down again. Her legs were trembling, out of control. Beverly looked back at the forest and could see the shadows moving there. She needed to get away.
Return to me.
There, twigs, breaking. One of them was coming toward her. With a scream, she pushed herself up, stumbled, but managed to keep on her feet. In front of her was a wide plain, and right in the middle, a city. She could see giant tarps hanging between the roofs of the buildings, a makeshift wall covering the perimeter, and her heart seemed to miss a beat. Survivors had taken back part of the city. Beverly took a stumbling step and almost collapsed again. Her legs didn't work anymore. All her muscles were cramping up. But she needed to get there. It would be safe. She forced herself to take another step, and another. Behind her, something broke through the shrubs.
Return to me.
The raspy voice growled. Beverly knew she wouldn't make it. Not with that thing behind her and more following. She pulled out her knife, knowing it wouldn't help her much. The man didn't feel pain. A flash of light appeared from atop the highest building in the city. 1 moment later, she heard the bang and felt a gust of wind as a bullet passed her by. Behind her, the thing gave off one last squelching sound and fell to the ground. Beverly didn't turn around to look. She stumbled forward. People were still alive. There was still hope. Beverly started walking, then jogging as the darkness of the woods at her back seemed to grow louder and louder.
Return to me.
The sniper who had saved her life just now wouldn't manage to get them all. She cried out and tried to keep on her feet as behind her 3 words, like echoes, repeated over and over again.
Return to me.
They all screamed, as above them, in the sky, a giant eye looked down at the spectacle.